Hey guys, I'm Brent.
I'm Lila, and you can find us on the web at www.braintrustlive.com.
And
Listen,
yeah,
we told you that we were going to record a podcast yesterday so that we could talk about the Electoral College finalization extravaganza.
I don't
And
even know. Did
so
we tell
we
people
forgot.
that, or did we just not do a podcast on Sunday? And then
Maybe I individually told people that
I
because
think
they
that's
were
what
asking me
happened.
where the podcast on Sunday was. The point is, we didn't know there would be a coup attempt
Right.
yesterday.
On
We
Sunday,
were
I texted
unprepared.
Lila and I was like, hey, there's a runoff on Tuesday. And last week was like fairly slow.
It was a holiday.
It was a holiday. So it's like, whatever. It was like, hey, there's a special election on Tuesday. They're counting the electoral votes on Wednesday. Let's record a podcast on Wednesday night so we can talk
Sure,
about those things and it'll be fun.
sure.
And then, yesterday was yesterday.
Right.
So
Yesterday,
here we are today.
armed rioters took over the
Yeah, domestic
Capitol.
terrorists, I think is the
Committed
term
a
you were
terrorist
looking
attack was I was going to say
for.
armed rioters committed a terrorist attack at the Capitol.
Yeah, there you go. That's it.
Yeah.
Nailed it.
I want to make sure, because there was so much discussion about rioters during the BLM protests, much of it inaccurate or being ascribed to people that actually were far-right instigators. I wanted to be clear as this was unfolding yesterday with everyone that this is actually what rioters, this is rioters. You can tell because they were rioting, which is different than what was frequently happening at Black Lives Matter protests, which was mostly a police riot.
Right.
This is what a riot looks like. A police riot is what the situation in DC where they tried to clear that church so that Trump could take the picture with the upside down Bible.
Right. That was
was
when
about.
police were attacking people. And this was
Right.
when people were attacking police.
Us.
People were attacking us.
I don't know.
They weren't really attacking the police because the police weren't putting them
we're
much of a
taking
fight.
selfies with them and cooperating. So it's hard to know what was going on. I certainly don't
man.
know if I understand what the deal was with the police there, because I have been to protests on like a random Thursday in May that have had more police presence in DC than that did. So I know that it was not just that they were caught unawares, because here's the thing. If someone is like, hi, I'm planning to host a riot, it will take place at this time in this location, and we made merch, so you'll know that we're there.
Yeah. It'll be led by the president of the United States.
It'll be led by the president of the United States, and also you'll be able to tell who we are because we'll all carry huge flags with us that denote what we're there to do. Then I think the appropriate response as a law enforcement agency is to be like, I wonder if we could prevent this riot from getting out of hand.
Well, that's why they're all resigning right now, Lila.
Not soon enough. Not soon enough. But what was yesterday I thought would be a day that would be incredibly disappointing because I would have to watch a lot of boring speeches, but actually started off on a good note because we had just found out that the race had finally been called for Ossoff, or was about to be called for Ossoff. And in the middle of the riot, we found out that he was outside of the margin where they can even call for a recount. So Ossoff, surprisingly,
he's ahead by like 40,000 votes right now. Like, it's quite a bit.
I know. Yeah. I mean, a surprise to anyone who's ever followed the career of Jon Ossoff. There's not much to follow.
I mean, that's a real thanks Trump right there is what that is. I hope we don't give Jon Ossoff any more credit than he deserves.
He doesn't deserve even 1 ounce of credit for that. I think Raphael Warnock deserves most of the credit, and then Donald Trump deserves the rest.
The rest of it, yes.
Jon Ossoff was like, it was like running the absence of a person there.
But yeah, yesterday was a long day, literally and figuratively, because it was actually a long day.
It was long in both physical time and thought time.
You'll know, yes, the thought time, because I actually, as I started this yesterday, knowing that we were going to record a podcast, like started taking notes like immediately when I turned on the TV. And you'll know that yesterday started with simpler times by me telling you that the first note was a commentary on the mask that Steve Scalise was wearing, which was ridiculous, certainly.
His American flag mask that didn't fit right, and he kept having to readjust it, and it had those vents that you're not supposed to have, and he was standing next to a giant poster of a part of the Constitution that he kept pointing to as if that was explaining why we couldn't obey election laws.
But I mean, that sounds quaint now, doesn't it?
It was sort of adorable that we were concerned about that at the time.
I know.
And then there was this weird moment where Mitch McConnell got up and was like, this is absurd and we should stop doing this. And after the first challenge to Arizona came up, and everyone was like, what? Mitch McConnell not being a huge monster? And then for a moment, people got carried away. And I was like, let's calm down.
Well, there was a lot of that yesterday, and we're going to talk about some of the other
Yes.
people who spoke later. I'm thinking specifically of Lindsey Graham, at least right offhand, anyway. And
Yes.
We'll get to all of them
Kelly Loeffler,
collectively, but yes, I mean we
James
can't
Langford.
we can't be living in a world where those people are being applauded for doing a base level
for upholding like the basic tenets of the Constitution, like the most straight ahead constitutional responsibility that they have.
And also, I mean, we might as well do it now since we're talking about it, but also they're all just, and granted, Mitch McConnell did this before the insurrection yesterday, but I mean, like, what they are all trying to do is to unwind themselves from the legacy of Donald Trump, which was bad enough for Mitch McConnell to do it before he incited an armed insurrection.
They should not let them, and I can tell you why.
But yeah, exactly. They don't get to do this.
They don't get to do this, and I think the perfect example of why we can't lionize them in these final moments this way is John McCain, because John McCain got to go out a hero. John McCain saved the ACA after working tirelessly to destroy it, while he was like on his deathbed, basically. And listen, that was a good thing that he did. But John McCain also brought us Sarah Palin. He is the originator of the Donald Trump problem in many ways. So John McCain is as complicit in what has happened here and everywhere else in the last 4 years as any of the rest of these fools. And so allowing him to kind of like be remembered as this hero, as a vet, as a heroic vet who saved healthcare, and forgetting the like 40 years of terrible things he did in between, including laying the groundwork for this exact moment that we're living through, because the first incarnation of Donald Trump was Sarah Palin.
Yeah.
And while Sarah Palin is in many ways less problematic because she's ridiculous and also more of a poet than Donald Trump will ever be. The reason that we were able to like tolerate a presence, like a ridiculous presence like Donald Trump, a know-nothing who did nothing but far-right dog whistles, is because of a choice John McCain made. So don't let Mitch McConnell be the guy that saved the election by giving a speech about how he didn't want to overturn the democratically elected president of the United States, or the democratically elected electors of, whatever ridiculous nonsense. If we've learned anything, it is that A, you should have a much shorter lame duck period. Your lame duck period should be only as long as you take to count the votes. And B, you should not have a 7-step process to certifying the results of a presidential election. Get in, get out, count the votes, declare the winner. Don't have 300 extra procedures that need to be followed through.
They declared him the winner last night, or this morning, I guess, really it was. I was kind of like, okay, great, for the 17th time.
I mean, well, and like all night, everyone was like, oh, so I see Donald Trump has lost Arizona once again. I see Wisconsin once again slips from his grasp. Like, it was all night. We had to make jokes that we've been making for months, because at every turn, we had to keep, we've had to reaffirm that the voters of these places where the votes have been counted and there were no irregularities and everything was fine, voted for the people that they voted for.
I know.
So in any case, don't remember Mitch McConnell as anything other than Mitch McConnell, a man with a scary hand condition who is the embodiment of evil.
Yeah, exactly.
Another thing that was notable in those cute days, back before an armed insurrection, was that they stupidly, listen, maybe they have assigned seats in the Senate. I've never understood this, but Dianne Feinstein was in the background of Chuck Schumer's shot as he was making his various pleas to Republicans to stop being idiots. And it was just too much to have to watch her for that long.
Part of me, I feel bad for her for a lot of reasons, but part of me feels bad for her specifically.
This is the famous Brent feeling bad.
Well, I mean, look, she looked like she was about to fall asleep, but then you think to yourself, well, she's trying to stay awake through a Chuck Schumer speech. Like, what's a person to do? I mean, I was also finding myself falling asleep at the same time. Yeah. So, like, on some level, you're like, okay, well, Di-Fi is just all of us now.
And this went on way past her bedtime. I mean, they were up till 4 a.m.
Oh, yeah.
And the funniest thing,
my mom said, Carla, sorry, but I stole that joke and used it as my own for pretty much the entirety of the day to literally anyone who texted me about anything yesterday. So,
at some point early in the proceedings, early in the chaos, not in the early proceedings, but early in the chaos, my mom turned to me and was like, Who do you think was in charge of having to explain what's happening to Dianne Feinstein?
It remains one of the funniest things that I've ever heard. Ever.
It does make you chuckle, you know? It makes you chuckle. In any case, well, and then I added, and how many times do you think they had to explain it?
Well, that's right. That's
the joke. For those of you that aren't California politics aficionados.
Right. It's because
she has dementia. Right. In any case, during that early adorable period, Ted Cruz was up there giving remarks as if he was some sort of hero for the Constitution. He wants some sort of commission to look into voter fraud that they made up.
I was going to say, and this is, as multiple people tried to explain to both Cruz and Hawley and whatever bozos were sort of like on board with this, that this was like, sure, fine, but a 10-day commission where we have to like, is not going to do anything. And also like, when you're counting the electoral votes is not also the time to be having like a congressional commission to like look into voter fraud, which every court in America has decided doesn't exist. I was going to say, regardless
the thing
of that
you already have is the decision of every court in America telling you that there was no voter fraud. So there's almost no reason to set up a commission.
Yeah.
Some might argue there's the opposite of a reason to set up the commission because there's definitive proof from every source that there's no need for it.
Yeah.
But I think one thing that was really striking to me was, they all quickly changed their tune after the armed insurrection. And that to me said that they knew that this was a stunt, that they never intended this to be a real thing, that they were wasting our time. They were wasting taxpayer time. They were wasting human lifetime. They were wasting TV time. I mean, I'm sure, listen, nobody likes having a 24-hour news thing go on more than cable news, but they were wasting their time as well because all of this was just theater and they knew it. And then after they kind of their bluff got called, a lot of them came back and kind of admitted that they knew it was theater. And one of those people was the person whose remarks were interrupted by the armed insurrection, which was James Langford from Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Super middle of the road white guy with evil ideas. He was going on as we're watching in split screen on TV as like armed protesters. I keep calling them armed because I feel like no one is acknowledging that a lot of those protesters were armed, but they were. They had brought mace. They maced the police indoors. Some of them were armed with actual weapons. So, and they were using sticks and shit. They were breaking down windows and doors, which, by the way, are our windows and doors. They were breaking down our property. This is property that belongs to all of us. So you can feel personally aggrieved at them because your Capitol building was vandalized by them. In any case, a side note though,
we used to clean that shit up.
Right?
Everybody worried about taxpayer dollars.
Exactly. And so James Langford is giving a speech about how important it is to make sure that all the votes are real votes or whatever he was up to. Suddenly, someone comes in and ushers Mike Pence out of the room. And then all of a sudden, it's like all hell breaks loose. That's the moment where everyone in America switches from C-SPAN to cable news because C-SPAN is not the right place to be watching if you're looking for breathless coverage of of an event that's a breaking interruption to the congressional schedule. So everyone immediately switches to cable news, where we discover that the protesters that have been slowly pushing their way towards the Capitol have breached the Capitol and are now inside the Capitol and are now running roughshod around the Capitol.
Have broken into the Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry. I mean, ushered into the Capitol.
Right, ushered into the Capitol by a police escort.
I mean, literally, when they were
carefully opened the gates for them.
Yeah, when they were showing those shots of like people walking in and out of there, it looked like they had just like gone into a museum gallery.
Yeah, they got, well, I think the funniest thing, and I wasn't the only person who commented on this, but I was mad that everyone else noticed it too, because I wanted to be the only one who commented on it, was that when they were in Statuary Hall, which is sort of one of the main halls that you pass through in the Capitol, it's like a place that if you're doing stuff in the Capitol, you're constantly walking back and forth. And there's usually tourists and stuff in there. They stayed inside the stanchions. Like,
yes, I know.
It was like they were on a class trip. Yeah. Right. They broke in by literally breaking down windows with sticks, like a literal mob of crazy like villagers.
Yeah.
And then got inside and took selfies of themselves while staying inside of the ropes in Statuary Hall.
You know what I bet there were a lot of yesterday? Bulging veins.
Oh, the most bulging veins. There was bulging veins, and there were also, one thing I learned this morning, which to me just really, listen, I was mad. but people peed in there. Some of them peed on the Capitol.
Of course they did.
That's our build. You can't listen. Your disrespect for what is a beautiful old building was already startling to me.
Yeah.
I don't need you to be peeing in there too.
It's disgusting.
That is our place to. It was a nightmare situation.
Yeah.
But as soon as they get inside, it's like as the videos are being released online, because I should note that there are reporters in there, but also every single one of them is like live streaming the whole situation. So the fact that there weren't 1,000 arrests is really baffling to me, because every single one of them was not only going in, but taking their mask off and then live streaming the entire experience. So
well, they're looking for all those people, and they've found a lot of them already. Like I've been watching CNN, and they've identified people. Some people have already been fired. Like social media is on the case. One
way that they could have identified them immediately was to arrest them on the scene while they were witnessed breaking the law.
I know. Well, I did hear something about that actually, and this isn't a great excuse because they just should have had the appropriate backup, and that's why I think everybody from the
but they didn't have backup.
They didn't have backup, so it became impossible to actually make arrests, because once everybody got in there, it turned into A, trying to get them out, and then B, also it was more about the protection of the people who were inside, right? So it's like,
and it was had to be because these people were acting in a violent and crazy manner.
Well, right. Well, and a lot of those people are old. We heard in the Ben Sass comedy hour later in the evening about how he was talking about, being worried about all the octogenarians that were like trying to get down the stairs.
Yeah. Ben Sass, a trauma comedian of the highest order.
I mean, that speech was.
It was fascinating.
Also, amateur
to watch.
Everybody was an amateur historian yesterday. Everybody had a story about how this was like some moment in history that they've learned a lesson from. Like,
did they spend all of lockdown researching a moment in history so that they could deliver it later in remarks? Because it sort of seemed like, I will tell you, what Ilhan Omar did in lockdown was write up articles of impeachment.
Articles of impeachment. Right.
What the rest of these fools did in lockdown.
Josh Hawley sent out fundraising emails. Right.
And then the rest of them seem to be researching obscure historical points that they could later point to in a speech to seem like they're super well read.
I know.
But things. So first of all, it was like very hard to follow what was going on as this was going on, because it seemed so inconceivable.
I've got a lot of notes on here, and even as I was rereading them at some point last night, I was like, whoa.
Yeah, like first we're here that gunshots are being heard in the House chambers.
Yeah.
And then we see images of policemen in the House chambers with guns drawn at a door that is barricaded with like three different chests of furniture.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And then at another House door, and this is a House door that I have actually been through because I've taken a tour of the House floor, as has anyone who spends a lot of time at the Capitol. There's like the speaker's hallway, and then that's usually, if you're going to give someone a tour, that's how you bring them in. Those doorways are the doorways that woman was shot at. It was, and the footage of it, so one woman died. She died after being shot by the police. If you watch the footage of what happened, because it's on camera, it is the most insane 1 minute of anything that you've ever seen. It's a miracle anyone made it out of that situation alive.
I know.
And it's not wild because the police are overreacting. Like, sure, I'm not even in favor of, in a country where we had sensible gun laws, I wouldn't be in favor of the police having weapons. So this is not to comment on whether they should or should not be shooting people in general, but the police are not the ones overreacting. The rioters are it's insane. They're taking their flags and poking, and breaking the glass of the doors.
They're stealing things.
Trampling each other. They're destroying things. They're stealing stuff. It's like wild to watch.
That one guy who died, who accidentally tased himself and then had a heart attack.
Is that what happened? I've been wanting to hear about the other medical emergencies that.
Yeah, somebody tased himself and then had a heart attack, and he was.
Oh God.
Apparently, if Twitter is to be believed, but I'm just going to believe Twitter at this point.
And why not?
Why not, right? He was attempting to steal. Everybody was stealing things, right?
Yeah.
People were walking out with podiums. Like people were stealing things from people's desks or whatever.
Right. They were breaking nameplates.
Right. And I think they were just obviously taking random shit because that's what you do when you loot things. And that's really what they were doing. That they were looting the place.
Yeah.
You want to talk about
Our
looters.
capital.
Yeah. Was it was a painting of Tip O'Neill, which is like, can you imagine? First off,
Oh, what an
I
embarrassing
mean,
way to die.
dying while attempting a coup on Congress from tasing yourself, but also in an attempt to steal a picture of Tip O'Neill. Really? That's
That
it?
is,
That's how you
well,
gotta
to be
go?
fair, a very fitting way for someone participating in this to go.
I mean, girl.
The most. That is so tragic in a way that's also so hilarious. I just I don't know how to feel about it, because you don't ever want to feel hilarity at someone dying, but you also don't want people to choose to die in such hilarious ways.
I know. The other thing that I could not ever keep my eyes off of while they were like showing shots of the exterior anyway was the giant Jesus 2020 flag. I mean, it was huge.
It was huge. And it was visible in every shot.
Yeah, they had like mounted it or like taped it somehow up that it was just like mounted on the Capitol, basically.
It's a lot of great jokes were also made about how walls don't work, because there are all these shots of these rioters. Sorry, they're not protesters anymore. No. Once they breach the Capitol, they're now rioters. Of them climbing the walls of the Capitol.
Oh yeah.
And so it was like a whole meme on Twitter last night, making fun of how walls don't help. But also there was like a lot, like as this is all breaking, they're finding suspicious packages all over the Capitol. They have found multiple pipe bombs. They pulled over a guy whose car was filled with Molotov cocktails.
Yep.
Yeah, there was a pipe bomb at both the DNC and the RNC.
Yep.
I mean, it was not just a protest that got out of hand. It was a planned, attempted coup by the president, who urged people to commit a violent attack on government.
Oh yeah.
And that is textbook terrorism.
Yeah. Well, and also just inciting this is a crime.
Yes.
So like whether they invoke the 25th Amendment or impeach him, both of which are on the table, we'll talk more about that as we go here. But like whether they do that or not, someone couldn't literally just charge him with a crime.
As they should.
As they should.
We all learned a lot about the definition of sedition yesterday. Because people kept calling it treason, and it's not really treason because we're not at war, and it's not aiding and abetting a foreign power, but it is sedition but in the most textbook definition of it.
Yeah.
And I think somebody said, some Republican who was mad at him said something like it almost crossed the line to sedition in the remarks following, like Langford or somebody.
No, yeah.
And everyone was like, no, it's pretty definitively, definitely an act of sedition.
Right.
That is not a question. Like this is the definition.
Yeah.
Is the whole definition. In any case, it was chaos. They had to put a 6 p.m. curfew in DC. There was an issue with the National Guard because it's a federal, DC is not only is the Capitol a federal property anyway, but DC itself is under federal governance. And so Muriel Bowser is not a governor and can't just like activate the National Guard. You need the executive branch to activate the National Guard. And it ended up being Pence. Without Trump's permission, who did it, which is not even legal, but no one knew what to do because Trump just wasn't doing it. And instead, hours into this, released a video essentially validating that he told the protesters that he loved them and they were really special. And he was like, we shouldn't commit property damage, but this election was stolen. Like he reiterates that the election was stolen after, and then tells them how special they are and how much he loves them. But I mean, he's in the middle of this chaos, knowing what's going on, because we know he's watching TV as we are, like continues to incite the crowd.
Yep.
To the extent that Mike Pence, whose whole family was there, and listen, I'm not trying to care about Mike Pence, but his whole family was with him because this was sort of his last final hurrah of doing anything, because everyone knows the vice president's fake job.
Yep.
But they had to be whisked away and put in hiding. And Donald Trump never contacted him once during the siege. So Donald Trump never contacted his vice president, who was left to make decisions illegally, I might add, because he had no choice, to protect the rest of the Capitol by, calling in the National Guard. And Donald Trump never even checked on him.
Well, he doesn't care.
He doesn't care. No, of course. He was mad at Pence because Pence was going to let the electoral votes be counted.
That's right. Yes.
But also the shots of the house being evacuated are really nuts because they had to get, they have gas masks they have like a emergency under the seats. They have like emergency kits of some sort.
Yep.
They were all instructed to get their gas masks. They all have to, all of them walk out with gas masks in their hands. Some of them have those like hoods, those plastic hoods on. I noticed you could tell who had like national security backgrounds because they just put the hood on. Everyone else was like, what do we do? And the people from national security backgrounds are like, well, I'm just going to sit here with this. I'm going to immediately put this mask on. I'm not going to ask any questions. Like, but you know, there's like footage of like, there's one picture of like Pramila Jayapal, like lying in the gallery, freaking out. It's really alarming footage. And I can say also the footage of them evacuating in the tunnels is really alarming. And something that like, as someone who has been part of a large scale evacuation like that, I could really like tell how terrified everyone was. You could really feel viscerally how terrifying it was because they really didn't know if they were going to literally have to fight their way out. Like there was not security backup. They were kind of almost left to their own devices. Some hero remembered to take the box with the electoral vote stuff in it. These two women who look like they're 7 years old. Are stoically walking.
There'll be a biopic about them in the next.
We're going to hear that story
20 years
forever.
From now about how they saved the republic.
But like some, very young staffer was who rescued the box with the actual electoral votes documented. Not that, I guess you can just print them out again. Me too. But it was heroic. And then my favorite part of all of this is that so protesters take over both chambers and pose for pictures with each other and ransack things because they're fucking assholes. And one of them, who is depicted pretty prominently in every part of this protest, is this guy in bull horns and no shirt, and he's wearing like an animal pelt. And he is the one, they told us before this happened, the right promised that they would blame Antifa for whatever happened, and they did. And they keep trying to point to him to say that's how we know it's not the right, because this guy is obviously Antifa. This man goes by the name QAnon Shaman.
Oh yeah, he's a known
to police. He's a known Q guy. He is a well-known far-right fixture.
So many of these people
all of them.
I mean, like
the guy who broke into Nancy Pelosi's office, same deal. He's a well-known far-right activist.
We know all of these people as either Q or at least Proud Boys, if nothing else, or I mean, like these people are known.
So anyone who tells you that they have proof that it's Antifa because some guy in a ridiculous outfit showed up, that is bordering some kind of weird drag, but is not.
Well, and also like with all, I'm sorry, but like, I get that sometimes to the untrained eye, sometimes crazy loser Trump people might present as like a hipster.
That's fair.
Right? But like, we who know better, because there was an image that I think that I sent to you yesterday from a friend of a friend who was like a total Q person who posted an image of that guy with like a bunch of other guys. And they were like, do these really look like Trump supporters? And the answer was yes. Unequivocally, yes, they do look like Trump supporters. But I think the point was that they looked like somebody who like might be from Williamsburg.
Right.
Or Portland, maybe.
Right. Yeah, Portland, I feel like is the...
and look, if you're from Des Moines, then maybe you don't know.
Right. But here's a question.
But we know.
Should you? Because if you're from Des Moines, you still have the internet. Like we've been to Des Moines a few times in the last year or two.
That's a month.
And all the times that we were there, we had just like freely available internet just everywhere we went.
Yeah.
Couldn't have been more available. No, it was almost too available. Everything was too available. The roads were clear and there was internet everywhere. It's, So you might think that you should know if that's
fair.
I'm just saying some things. In any case, the National Guard situation was the moment that this became suspicious to me in a way that made me want to have a conspiracy theory was I was just like, I have been at protests, first of all, in DC, like I said, where like hundreds of people got arrested for doing much less. And I know that there's a double standard. Everyone noticed it. It was very clear on display. It's hard to arrest the people that are yourself if you are a police officer. And so I get that there was some confusion because they could identify so instinctively with these protesters.
Yep.
But the fact that it took them this long to get backup, usually if you go to a protest that is likely to turn violent, even in a minor way in DC, they have their riot gear fucking ready.
They've been threatening violence for months.
They do not take 4 hours to put their riot gear on. They didn't have riot gear. The National Guard wasn't showing up. When they finally did show up, it was a bunch of unarmed people to go do things like direct traffic because of the curfew so that the police officers could go back to the Capitol. Yeah. It was not armed National Guard.
And they were out long after curfew too, just there.
There, I think total were maybe 53 arrests. I mean, there were a number of arrests and they were all for violating curfew. It wasn't for starting a coup.
Right. They're going to get those people, I think, though.
I think they have to. The
FBI is who's going to do it. Ultimately.
Right.
I don't think they're going to fuck around about it.
I think that they have to, but I think that the way that this happened was rightfully incredibly frustrating. To just any person who's ever been to a protest before.
Sure. Because
I think that to be so lax in not even caring that this is the message you're very clearly sending, when they called in, they called in federal officers to disperse peaceful crowds over the summer repeatedly with tear gas and rubber bullets. And this crowd brought their own tear gas and fired it at the police. The only police that got really nuts on video, at least at this protest / riot / terrorist attack, were ones that got tear gassed by the rioters. So it's just, but I have one more thing I want to say, actually, talking about security, before we move on to how everyone then tried to unwind themselves from this after they had caused it. I saw a lot of people being like, why is the security at the Capitol so lax? It's hilarious how lax the Capitol, the security of the Capitol is. The razor aisle at Rite Aid has more security than the Capitol, blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
And I do want to remind everyone that is by design.
Yeah, you're supposed to be able to walk in there.
Belongs to us, and because of that, we are supposed to be able to access it.
Yeah.
I know that there are parts of it that they technically don't allow visitors into, but
or that you have to get a pass to go in.
But also, when you are there on business, you are able to go into a lot of those areas. Those are areas for people that are there to do the business of the American people.
Yeah.
But the building belongs to us. It is right that it is so open. The problem was with the security response, knowing that a riot was planned. The problem is not that the building is open to the public. It's a really slippery slope to be starting to complain that the Capitol is too available to all of us.
Yeah,
because civics classes really don't teach this because there are no civics classes. But one thing that I think people are routinely shocked to find out who don't know is that you can just go into your congressman's office or your senator's office and tell them what's on your mind. And that's something I encourage always, everyone who's ever in the vicinity of DC.
Don't tear gas them while you're in there.
Right. Well, yes. But it is your right as an American citizen to be able to access your representatives. And because of that, those buildings are open to the public on purpose. And this was an abuse of that for sure. And it was certainly at a certain point, no longer, I think, right to call them American citizens there on business.
Yeah.
Because they were not there to engage with the government. They were there to destroy it, and they were committing a crime because of that. But I think we should be careful about the language that we use to discuss what the problem was there, because the problem was not that American citizens have access to the Capitol.
Yeah.
Period. You own the Capitol. If they don't give you access to your own property, then you aren't an owner. And then it's not your government anymore.
Right,
and that is true at every level of government. Every
Totally.
state capitol is open to you.
Yep.
Every office of every one of your representatives is open to you. They don't want you to visit them because they hate dealing with you, but you should not let that stop you.
Right.
And so in any case, I think a lot of people don't realize that. And I understand why. I think it helps if you have a mom who constantly drags you to go visit people in Congress when you're a kid and then tells you, we own these buildings, so that you don't get nervous or whatever. But that is not how we should talk about what happened here, because
I agree.
The buildings are ours. And that we should be mad because that was our property they vandalized.
Yeah.
I feel personally affronted by their actions because that was my beautiful building that they were tearing shit off of.
Yeah.
And they didn't act in the kind of respectful manner that co-owners of a building are supposed to act.
I know, exactly.
In any case, as soon as so they finally do reconvene after senators and congresspeople have spent like 4 hours barricaded in various rooms. Like I saw some pictures of where they were hiding out, and some of them had like truly barricaded doors in the Capitol and stuff like that. Like it was very scary.
Looked like they were having a good time.
Some of them looked like they were at a party,
which was weird.
That was weird.
You know.
I certainly whoever Lindsey Graham was hiding out with was a charmer, because Lindsey Graham is sort of like a parasite. Like he just takes on the characteristics of like whoever the bigger power is that he's sucking up to. Yeah. And I think he realized that it was not going to serve him to suck up to Donald Trump in this moment. And so instead he, I think, found a mystery source of both alcohol and charisma that allowed him to deliver what for him were much more tolerable remarks than I've heard in years.
And he said exactly the right thing too. You know, I mean, he talked about like
and he said it in this like folksy.
He even acknowledged that he probably more than anyone else needed to say it.
No, it was weird.
Which was an acknowledgement of, you know, his own, you know, the fact that he has been, you know, carrying this guy's water for the last
complicit in all of this in the most directive ways.
Right, exactly.
Now it didn't stop him from being terrible 1 second later.
No,
because already today he's like, well, I don't know if we should remove him. Let's see if one more thing happens. Maybe what one more thing besides fomenting a coup.
I know, exactly.
Is he waiting? Where's his line? If fomenting a coup isn't the line, you don't have a line.
I know.
But in any case.
But the one thing that I actually kind of want to say about this and him and, you know, some of these other people that sort of, you know, retracted their support of the.
James Langford did as soon as he resumed. Right. Kelly Loeffler did.
You know, I think to a large degree, some of them realized that it no longer behooved them to, you know, be on the side of Trump. Some of them sort of just felt like after that day in history, it didn't make sense for them to be on the wrong side of it. But I also think there's something like broader here that I've been thinking a lot about today, actually, because, you know, at least the modern Republican Party, and maybe the Republican Party of old, is one of their hallmarks about everything is having a lack of empathy, right? They have a lack of empathy about how someone might feel if they didn't have healthcare. They have a lack of empathy for like how, you know, they're against gay people until they have a gay son. You know, Meghan McCain has been recently taking a bunch of shit because like she had a baby and now understands that we need to have, you know, better paid maternal leave in this country. Right. This is a hallmark of the GOP. And I think to a certain degree, the reason that this hit so hard for them is because for the first time, this happened directly to them.
Yeah,
they didn't have
consequences
to imagine what it was like for, like, let's say a coup to have happened maybe at the Georgia State House, because they tried that there yesterday too, by the way.
Yeah. Or a coup to happen at the Michigan State House, where they put their governor in grave danger by not, you know, or put one of our governors in grave danger by fomenting what was essentially a state revolution.
Yeah, exactly. So and they didn't care much about that, right? Everything was fine. You know, it was okay that they were going to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer and do whatever else that they were going to do. So I think on some level, like as terrible of a day as yesterday was on the whole, I mean, like, and it is this, I think, a commentary on what the GOP is anyway, that it literally took this for some of them to like have at least one moment of like looking inward. Like, can you imagine having to have like an armed insurrection, like come literally to your own front door for you to be like, oh, maybe all of this shit that, you know, the white supremacy and all
maybe a civil war wouldn't be that fun.
Fomenting ourselves for the better part of 4 years actually led to this. Like they didn't have to use their imagination any longer.
Well, and what's so funny is because I think, you know, media was sort of having a hard time figuring out how to cover this, because on the one hand, it was shocking because even I had sort of known that something was possible, but because we sort of live in a world where everything is as crazy as it is, it just like never occurred to me that something could shock me. So I just didn't expect to be shocked.
Right. Yeah.
You know, like I keep forgetting that Trump always has the power to shock you further. But in another sense, this is an entirely predictable outcome that people have been warning about for literal years. Totally. It's not like there was no way to see this coming.
Yeah,
We've been seeing it coming since before he even took office. Yeah. And I feel like the fact that it took this happening for them to see the connection, and maybe they didn't even see this connection, but see the connection between why people picked up on the dog whistles that led to this moment and the lies that led to this moment and said this could happen if you allow X, Y, and Z to happen, and why, and the fact that they were suddenly faced with like, oh, maybe an armed insurrection is only fun if it's someone else's door, which is kind of where their empathy ends, I think, because they certainly didn't care about this enough to stop Breonna Taylor, who was a person sleeping in her home, from being shot by armed people coming to her door. So obviously, their empathy ends with themselves anyway.
Well, that's it, right?
Right. I mean, that's having no empathy. But yeah, I think that the idea that so much of the media fell back on covering this as if it was a shock was kind of interesting to me, because I was like, oh, but like, this is the one thing we knew might happen. This is the entirely I mean, I've been frustrated with this actually a lot throughout the Trump era. And one of the reasons in the last year, I've gotten really snippy with people who express new shock and horror at the Trump administration on a daily basis, which is easy to do because everything is horrible. And I think a lot of the things that he does are very logical outgrowths of other things he's done. So when he turns around and blames Antifa for this, you can be annoyed that a person like him exists, but you can no longer be shocked that he would try to blame the left for, like, you can no longer be shocked that he would do what you would do if you were a narcissist and a sociopath in his situation, is exactly what he always does.
To do that, right?
So you have to have enough empathy you have to have the emotional intelligence to know what a narcissistic sociopath would do in any situation, and then you never have to be shocked by Donald Trump. And either I am the most emotionally intelligent person in America,
right,
or people are not using their heads. I think it might be the latter. But like, every single thing that happens is like a pretty logical outgrowth of every single other thing that's happened for this entire administration. And it gets reported every day as if it's shocking. But I think, there was this sort of like mantra on the left that we can't let this be normalized. And while I think obviously we shouldn't let this be normalized, we can't be caught off guard by it every single time either. Why was anyone caught off guard by a planned riot that announced they had merch at the riot? So they had MAGA Civil War merch with the date printed on it.
Well, they were giving, I was watching some news, or maybe I read it online or something, about how many tens of thousands of tweets about this very march had been sent, and what they were planning, and how many tens of thousands of Parler, tweets. That's not the right word, because
parlors,
like whatever it is, and like also how many
Parler parlays.
And like, I mean, like, they had shouted from the rooftop. I mean, can you imagine that if this was I mean, they are an actual terrorist group, but like, can you imagine if a terrorist group sent one tweet and they were like, we're going to take over the Capitol, people would have been fucking prepared to take over the group.
If one Muslim person somewhere on the internet had tweeted one of the plans that was tweeted, of these tweets, it's like we would have been locked down for the next year.
We would have drones struck their home, probably.
Right. I mean, the sort of the fact that, I mean, there's tons of footage of these crowds arriving in DC and getting worked up on the plane. There's some very scary footage of airplanes.
The plane videos are deeply upsetting.
Deeply upsetting. And planes are fucking scary anyway, because you're really stuck on there, Yep. I mean, you could fall out of the sky in an airplane. You don't need these idiots making it even worse. But I mean, like, that's a logical conclusion. Like, you could see that the crowd was in this mood. Also, the last time they came to DC, they had a fucking riot.
Oh.
So I don't know why we would be shocked that they might do it again when the exact same people show up with the exact same plans. But I think, and maybe this won't matter anymore because it's the end of this part of the Trump era, but I would contend that this is going to continue to plague us for years to come. And so we should really be thinking about how we want to handle it. We really need to stop. We need to stop being shocked by them. Everything they do is so stupid and logical. If you are in the minds, if you can imagine the mindset that they're in, which anyone can with their imagination, which is why we have imaginations, you can figure out their next move every time.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think that we have to, you're absolutely right. You have to carry on assuming that they are going to continue to be up to these things. I think there were a lot of people who, I get the reason that you would want to hope this, because it gives, being able to be hopeful about something is a comforting feeling, but I think a lot of people were sort of being like, is this the, the death throes of something right now? And it would be great if it was, but there's no reason to think that it is.
Well, I also think that we need to stop thinking in terms of, like, this is going to be unpopular with the left until I finish explaining it. So just bear with me. I'm not about what I think everyone is going to want to hear is that I'm saying we should try to understand them. That's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is that I had the experience this year through my hatred of Joe Biden of feeling myself radicalized, not to the right, but to the left. And I'm somebody who's been calling myself a socialist since I was 16. So, I was radicalizing from what was already a fairly radical position. It was getting a little annoying. But what I found as I radicalized is that I found myself tuning out to political rhetoric that previously had resonated with me. I found myself unable to listen to things that I knew were true. And to actually, I found myself getting angry about people framing things in totally normal ways that were totally true. And while I was aware that this was happening and I was aware that I wanted to combat that, I think we need to think about the fact that the center, just as the right is built entirely on antagonizing the center and the left, the center is very much built around antagonizing the right. Not in terms of policy. I don't mean that we should adapt like a white supremacist platform, but I just mean in terms of framing. And I think that, when you think about what the conversations are that radicalize people, a lot of them are reactions to them feeling like they are being framed as bad people by the center left. And that is often because they are taking bad actions. So I'm not here to suggest that they're being good people. I'm here to suggest that one of the things that I found in the Sanders movement that I did not find in the Biden movement was Sanders is really good at speaking to a crowd without establishing a particular political frame that binds you to a sort of particular kind of political identity. So Sanders is really good at speaking in layman's terms about issues that affect all of us from a left-wing perspective. That's kind of what populism, left-wing populism is.
And that's the first thing that he does is at all of his rallies is to literally force you to look at the people around you, right?
Exactly.
And have care for them and imagine what it is that they might be going
through. Right. He literally begins by asking you to have empathy. And then also the language that he uses to describe his positions is not charged language. It's not language that belongs to the right or left. The right has been really good about seizing American imagery and turning it into a right-wing only thing. The left has been really good about taking sort of shots at them by trying to sound super #woke with, and instead specifically issuing dog whistles. I think a lot of the conversations that we've been having on this podcast about the Biden cabinet being shaped as sort of superficial diversity instead of real diversity is part of that, where, the center kind of hangs only on the frame. They don't even have any content. They're not telling you anything. They're only we're so diverse and wonderful and look at you assholes. But they don't offer you any sort of solutions to any problems in doing that. They just sort of try to make you feel like you're a bad person. And the far right is just there to be fucking setting everything on fire. So they're being monsters.
Yeah.
And the far left is being sidelined horrendously. But I think if Democrats want to understand what we do about these people, this is like a cult. When you think about what deprograms people from a cult, it's not people telling them that they're terrible people and that they're in a cult. It's people finding a different way to communicate with them. And so I think that you can do that without giving up your principles, but I think it's something that the center really needs to think about, because I think a lot of the ways that we even discuss policy are specifically designed to antagonize these kind of crazy people. And I know why we want to differentiate ourselves from them.
Obviously.
But I also don't think that that's a sustainable thing. And I think everyone thinks that the center is who's capable of reaching out to them. And I think it's actually the left. And I've been saying that for a long time. And I don't think
I was going to say this podcast has been
right. The podcast has been saying that for a long time, but I don't think it's because of policy. These people don't give two shits about policy. They're just angry, tear it all down, racist assholes, you know. But I do think that we need to kind of lessen the tension in some way. And the way to do that is not to deliver empty speeches about how diverse we are. It is to deliver meaningful change to their homes.
Right. In smug ways.
In smug ways, right? It is to deliver meaningful change while explaining it to them in layman's terms that don't pin you to specific left-wing language or specific right-wing language that are outside of the frame.
Yeah.
And I don't trust anyone in government to do that, but I really wish that someone would. I think it was really like, I think it was sort of eye-opening for me to go through this cycle because I felt myself becoming untethered from the center in a way that was new and in a way where I was kind of aware it was happening. And
yeah,
I was kind of
also,
like,
that's one thing that differentiates.
Right. The self-awareness. They don't have the no,
yeah.
But like people acting in entirely predictable human ways is a thing that always is going to happen to people.
Totally.
And not all of them will be self-aware because almost nobody is self-aware. No one in the center is self-aware. I mean, no one's self-aware. So like, I think we need to think like not about how to reach out to people, but we do need to think about how to discuss our platform in ways that A, actually indicate that we have one, but B, are outside of the political framework that made this happen, that don't specifically antagonize the people that we're trying to, at least, we're not trying to bring them in and make them vote for us. We're trying to make them not be this fucking crazy. Right. It's like actually a public safety issue, right. More so than anything. I
mean, seriously.
And we don't need to do that while compromising on our principles. We don't need to do that by also saying, maybe we should fund the police for $1 million trillion and maybe we don't care about Black lives. We can do that while still caring deeply about things that we care about. Yeah. We just have to make sure that when we talk about those things, we're not using language that excludes people who don't understand the issue.
Yep.
In any case, I feel deeply about this today because I would like there to not be another coup attempt.
I mean,
and if there is a coup attempt, I want to be a part of it. I don't want it to be a far right coup.
I know.
My coup would be smarter, but one way that you know that this wasn't Antifa is that the left never gets this fucking far. I mean, let me tell you how often I've been at protests with people who, I know there's no Antifa, but people who might consider themselves sort of the core that is being referred to as Antifa. Sure. And they think they're real badass, but they never fucking make something like this happen. So, this wasn't us.
Right.
That's, this was the FA that the Antifa people are against.
Exactly.
This was fascism.
This was FA.
It's well documented in history, you guys. And that's why we can't be shocked, because every single thing that's happened has been a thing that we can look to history and be like, oh, this is the thing that happens. And here's what we can expect to happen next if we don't do anything.
Yeah, exactly.
In any case, a lot of people wondering if cabinet members are going to invoke the 25th. This is a growing movement of people that are not in the cabinet. And I know that there's talk about the cabinet potentially being, some cabinet members potentially being interested, but what I'm noticing is that they would rather resign than have any responsibility.
Well, yeah, that's the
Everyone is just finger pointing. It's like everyone who's not in Congress is like, you should impeach. And then everyone who's in Congress is like, you should invoke the 25th.
I know nobody wants it. Like although Nancy Pelosi, to her credit, I will say, did say that they would impeach if the 25th isn't invoked. And yeah. There were some reports earlier today that Biden, didn't feel like he was in the mood to do either of those things. And for starters, I would just say,
Biden is not going to do anything.
No, he's not going to do anything. But also,
let's not wait for him.
The reason that, besides just at a very core level, doing the thing that's right, which is a thing that we talked about a million different times when we were talking about his first impeachment, about whether, that was going to backfire or whatever it was going to do. It's just sort of like, well, is it the right thing to be doing or not? And so on the base level, yes, it is the right thing to be doing. But also, to me, the main reason to not do this, or the main reason to do this, is because then he can't run for fucking president again.
Yeah, we got to make sure he can't run for office again.
Right?
We have to.
I mean,
that is to everyone's benefit. That is to Ted Cruz's benefit. That is to my benefit. There are very few things that me and Ted Cruz might benefit from in the same way, but that is one of them.
No, it's totally true.
And I think to some extent, I've said this a million times, so maybe nothing is ever different, but this is like a moment where we can't allow there to be no consequences for something this big.
Totally.
Because Tom Cotton is smarter and capable of this. So, if you don't have any consequences for literally fomenting a revolution against the government, using lies, like based on mistruths that you have been propagating as the president, using your power as president and platform as president to do it, then we don't have any laws. We don't have a government. Like that. It is really critical that there be a line drawn here. And I think it is critical for everyone's protection. It's not just critical for the Democrats' protection or anything. It's critical for just the country's protection. And I think that's why, I mean, smart people, there are tons of articles of impeachment roaming around Congress right now. The House would, I think, happily impeach. I think the Senate needs, I don't know when they're going to seat those new senators, but they really need to look themselves in the eye and think, am I going to go down with this ship? Or am I going to pretend like I stood up? And they're going to choose not to because they're wimps, but I had to try. I think the one complication of invoking the 25th is that this has been a pattern of behavior for him the entire time. And if we had never deemed him unfit to hold office up until this point, I think, the reason people are saying the 25th thing won't work is because he can basically appeal it. He can write a letter saying that, so it will take too long and it won't actually get him out in time. We need something that removes him right away because the next 2 weeks are going to be fucking nuts if he's not removed from office. But also, I think it's going to be really hard to argue that this isn't consistent with his behavior. He didn't snap yesterday. This is just how he is.
Well, and also politically, make every single Republican on earth vote against an article of impeachment right now.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, I understand, there at the time of the initial impeachment, while I obviously wanted them to be voting on it for the reasons of just that we just talked about, there was reason, people thinking that there might be political backlash to that were not insane people. Right? Like thinking people made good points about how that could possibly backfire. Right? I don't see a world in which any voter on earth holds their elected accountable for
removing this loon,
removing this president. That's not going to happen. They're going to be held responsible for not removing him. So as they should be on a pure political wins and losses. This is a winner.
And I also would say to people, I think a lot of people on the left and just sort of in general thinking districts immediately came out and said, this is impeachable and we should impeach him. A lot of moderate Democrats have not gone on the record yet. Adam Schiff has not gone on the record yet. I think that one thing that we can do right now is we can be calling our representatives and saying, you have to go on the record saying that this needs to happen. It would be powerful if Adam Schiff said it needed to happen because he was the
probably more than anyone else in the House.
More than anyone else. And it would be important that it is important for him, a person who represents me in Congress.
Well, also that, same.
To also have drawn a line here. But I mean, it is important that literally every single member of Congress be forced to come out in favor of this right now. So that we make clear that they understand that they have a responsibility to enforce a line. It's they're too afraid to. And also, I think another thing is the difference between the 25th and an impeachment is I think that at this point, Congress has to hold him responsible to remind him that Congress has the power to hold the president responsible. Congress is us. That's where our power is. So I don't want to hear that we need a bunch of people we didn't fucking elect to remove him from office. We have the power to do that.
Right. We're expecting people like Betsy DeVos. That's the other thing too. Besides the fact that it might take too long, that cabinet is a bunch of fucking lackeys.
Exactly.
So there's not, and especially if the thinking cabinet members start to, I'm thinking air quotes over here, by the way, if those are the people who start to resign, then they're never going to invoke the 25th anyway, because the only people who are left are his
sycophants.
Yeah. Exactly. So
no, I think it is important.
You can't count on those people.
Both in terms of establishing who has the power here, which should be the people. And not a bunch of appointed rich people. And also in terms of setting up a dynamic with future presidents that makes it clear that they answer to the people.
Agreed.
I'm starting to doubt that this has been the most brilliant form of government that's ever been created, like they told us in civics class or whatever. But I mean, let's at least try to make it work the way it was supposed to. Good Lord.
Yeah, you want to talk about upholding the Constitution.
Yeah. I will say that the new squad is way better than the old squad, and I loved the old squad because Cori Bush was out there immediately. What she used her lockdown time to do is write up a resolution to a resolution of expulsion for the congressional members who incited this. Yeah. And that is exactly what they should do.
And then Mondaire Jones immediately was like,
yeah, I'm in.
I'll co-sponsor this.
Yeah. I think that there is this sense often that people who are activists like require some experience in government in order to know how to do anything. And I think that what we're going to see with Cori Bush, which is what I always say, and I think what we saw with AOC, it's what I always say about people who are regular people or who are activists who go into government without having that experience, is that sometimes you need someone to have a new idea, because she is not in there being old time friends with all these people. Cori Bush does not give two shits about Josh Hawley, nor should she. She has not been forced to give a long-winded, flowery intro to him at something. She has not been in a position where she's had to listen to members of her own party do that. Yeah. She doesn't owe shit to anyone right now. Yeah. And she is in a kind of powerful position because she took out a huge Democratic dynasty. Yeah. Like, someone like her is exactly who thinks to themselves, well, let's try to fucking remove these people. See what happens. You know, like, I know, we don't need to sit around stroking each other's egos. Just get in there. In any case, she's killing it out there right now.
Oh my God, she's the best.
I mean, she's the best. Yeah. So in any case, Trump just released a hostage video today.
It was like right before we started recording.
He was barred from Twitter for 12 hours until he removed 3 tweets that were inciting riot. Yeah. He finally removed the tweets and got back on. But one of the tweets was, "These are things and events that happen when a sacred landslide election victory is so unceremoniously and victoriously stripped away from great patriots who have been badly and unfairly treated for so long. Go home and love and peace. Remember this day forever."
Oh, God.
Tweets like that. Tweets like asking people to,
Zuckerberg
go back to government.
Suspended him indefinitely.
Yes. Thank God.
Facebook and Instagram.
I know. Twitter needs to get their heads right.
I know they do. But I think a lot of a lot of those fools are also like big Facebookers also. I mean, yes, I realize Trump is not sending specific messages to people on Facebook. But
Trump himself is a Twitter animal.
Yeah.
He is not active on Facebook, so block him forever from Facebook. He doesn't fucking care. Right. Twitter is where he gets his air. What he needs right now is to be robbed of the ability to communicate with anyone other than via heavily produced videos that someone else has to produce and approve of until the end of his term.
Right, exactly. We got 13 more
days. They whisked him away to Camp David. He's in Camp David now. I don't know what he's doing there other than probably coming up with a way to top this. Which
just let him, guys, send him to someplace where there's many, many, many golf courses.
Yes. They wouldn't let him into Scotland.
Right? I mean, I would even allow him, I would even accept him in California. We have a lot of beautiful golf courses here.
He owns one here.
He owns one here. Like, we'll take him for 13 days if that will just allow him to just like not be doing anything.
If someone can take away his telephone, we will take him in person.
Yeah, we'll accept him.
Yeah. Just to set him loose on a lawn. Let him swing golf clubs around. My mom was like, they should just have him in a room in Camp David with Rikers guards protecting him, protecting, air quotes. And just that way, he'll be fed. He won't die.
Yeah.
But, certainly take away his means of communicating with everyone. This is not the time to be fooling around. And if you have to do it, if you have to A, not follow his orders, B, like, illegally steal items from him, a person who is the president, C, like talk him in circles until he's confused. I mean, do whatever you need to do to keep him on a treadmill.
Yeah.
So that he doesn't have the ability to act further.
Right.
Now, what I would love is if they remove him from office and only then do they pass the $2,000 checks. One thing he doesn't deserve is the win of giving us $2,000 checks. I'm happy that he chose to die on that hill, but I don't want him to get the credit for it. Not now that he's encouraged an insurrection.
Agreed.
There have been some resignations. Stephanie Grisham was the first one. She's Melania's chief of staff, but she's someone who's been working in the Trump family, Trump world for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, I did. Yeah, like that was, and that was actually the reason why that was kind of a big deal, because when they first announced that she had resigned, I was like, oh, okay. But like, she is sort of in that sphere. It was sort of assumed, I think, that she would probably just continue to work for the Trumps. Like, I mean, she's just like, she's somebody who works for the Trumps. Like, that's her shtick.
Right. She's like a Hope Hicks. She's
So that was actually, maybe just because you haven't heard of her doesn't mean that that's actually not a big deal, because she's a Trumper.
A lot of them are thinking of resigning, but don't have the nerve. I heard online that a couple of reporters were being told that people didn't want to lose their health insurance.
Well, that's rich.
What could prevent this is Medicare for all.
Yeah.
You can avoid fomenting a revolution and or aiding and abetting a coup if Medicare for all allows you to quit your job when it becomes a coup job.
Yep.
Just a thought for everyone out there.
Yep.
The flexibility to not engage in, traitorous acts is something that's nice about having health insurance.
Yeah.
Elaine Chao, who is Mitch McConnell's wife and transportation secretary,
she's the only
she resigned.
Cabinet member.
Right. She's the only cabinet member that's resigned so far. I think there's discussions among a couple others. Mick Mulvaney, though, resigned.
Yeah.
He's sort of been teetering on the edge, I think, for a while. And then the Capitol Hill police chief and the House Sergeant at Arms, and I think probably soon the Senate Sergeant at Arms, are all also going to lose their jobs over this, as they should.
Mm-hmm.
I can't believe that those Republicans got back in there and said, thanks to the heroic actions of the Capitol Police, who failed to protect them in any way, literally let a mob into the chambers themselves.
Yeah.
I know it's tough out there. I don't blame individual officers who were not staffed appropriately. I blame the ones that opened the gates to allow these people in.
Right.
But I mean, if you're one guy and a mob there were all these shots of one Capitol Hill policeman backing up as a mob of a bunch of crazed, people are running towards them. I'm not surprised they weren't able to keep them out of the Senate chambers. But I am a little bit maybe they hadn't done the job that they should have done in this moment. And if I were a member of Congress, I would be fucking pissed right now at them.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, they put the lives of all of the people who are there to represent us in danger.
Well, and maybe they are pissed, and that might be why they ended up resigning, and they were just, thanking the men.
Schumer has threatened.
That's what these people do.
Schumer has threatened the Senate Sergeant at Arms already that he would lose his job when he.
I'm sure he'll resign.
What I think is so interesting about this, though, just as a comparison, I have some experience with the Senate Sergeant at Arms because I have been to Senate votes a few times. And in the House, they'll let you get away with being rowdy, even though you're supposed to be quiet, because the House is kind of fun. But in the Senate, if you clap or make any sort of noise after the passage of your bill, so we were able to get in for the passage of the Zadroga Act this year, 2019 and 2015, whatever. I've watched it a few times. But every time we've gotten yelled at by the Sergeant of Arms for clapping. And I want to note that when I'm there with an entire crowd of first responders. So I'm there with just a bunch of cops and firemen. It's not like I'm there with a bunch of school children or just a bunch of liberals even. I mean, I'm there with them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm there with law enforcement basically.
Yeah.
And we have been threatened with arrest by the Sergeant at Arms every single time. And so the fact that they couldn't make any arrests as protesters ran roughshod over the chamber is hilarious to me, because they have threatened in no uncertain terms and in strong language me with arrest personally multiple times.
Ugh.
In any case,
crazy
fun times at the Capitol.
Yeah.
You guys, the good news is all these people have health insurance because they're going to need therapy.
Oh my God. Hello.
Well, this is going to be one of those moments like 9/11 in a lot of ways where everyone in America feels like they experience this with them, but watching it on TV is not the same as having actually run with a gas mask in your hand.
No.
through the tunnels into like a safe room that you then had to barricade the doors with chairs and shit. So this is going to be a thing that they're never able to adequately explain to people.
Well, you know
about
what?
the experience. Aside
from this, a lot of them should probably be speaking to a therapist.
That's so true.
So if this
is what gets them in the door,
then great.
Good work.
Yeah. Stay there. Yeah. Keep working on yourself, guys.
That's right. Never hurts.
Let 2020 be the year that you really, discover who you are.
Exactly. In any case, that's the coup news. We're going to be back on Sunday with Kat Calvin to discuss the rest of the news, because there was other news too.
Yeah.
Like potentially a lot of it.
It's a huge election.
It was a huge election. There were cabinet announcements. There, were charges not being made in police officer cases, in cases of police officers who have murdered people.
We had the most COVID deaths ever yesterday that we didn't bother to hear about until today because there was no time to think about it yesterday.
Exactly. And I'm sure that Kat will also have some thoughts on yesterday's activities.
Oh,
so,
yeah. We're going to let her have them.
We're going to let her have them. In any case, we will talk to you not even next week, but in a few days.
Yeah.
Bye.
Exciting. All right. Bye, guys. Here's to, Happy New Year, and let 2021 be
more of 2020.
I was going to say be coup-free, but
be coup-free. It's not coup-free. It's already
the
not
rest
coup-free.
Of it.
Right. Oh, yeah. Let's hope for a coup-free rest of 2020.
Yeah.
Bye.